Under the pestle, how terribly the rice suffers. But it comes out of the pouting as white as cotton. The same thing to man in this world occurs. Hard trials turn him into polished diamonds. For many years now, the image of rice grain used in a famous poem of the late President Ho Chi Minh has inspired an American doctor to pursue a humanitarian project named RICE. The project was started by him with the goal of bringing a new life to unfortunate children with disabilities in Vietnam. The doctor's name is Joseph Mark Rosen.
In the past 10 years, a doctor has surpassed all difficulties to bring renowned surgeons to Vietnam. Their role was to conduct reconstructive surgeries for children. To the families of those children, the name Joseph Mark Rosen has become more than familiar. While being an established doctor at the Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center, Dr. Rosen is also extremely knowledgeable of Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh. In today's episode, we will discover Dr. Rosen's connection with Vietnam.
Dr. Joseph Mark Rosen is a well-known and experienced surgeon who is currently teaching and working at Dartmouth College, New Hampshire. He has achieved many outstanding awards in the medical field and was granted a patent for inventing the microelectronic exon processors in 1986. Since the year 2005, with the support of U.S. organizations and individuals, Professor Joseph Rosen has been organizing annual working trips to Vietnam. Along with him, famous American doctors have been given on-site support to local doctors at the Vietnamese National Hospital of Pediatrics. They also give advices and perform reconstructive surgeries for over 50 complicated cases at the hospital.
Thank you, Dr. Rosen, for joining us on the show. I'm very glad you could make it, and it's an honor to have you here.
Well, thank you for inviting me to your show.
So can you talk about your connection with Vietnam a little bit? What brought you here in the first place?
What brought me here 10 years ago is I was on a surgical trip in Peru on the Amazon River, and I met a very nice nurse named Pam, and Pam said she's been on multiple trips to Vietnam, and she thought I would fit in really well in Vietnam and the Vietnamese culture, so she invited me on a trip to Vietnam, and I went with a group called Project Vietnam, where I came here, and during that trip in Project Vietnam, I ended up at the National Hospital Pediatrics, and I was able to, on that trip, meet a wonderful doctor who's in the audience, Dr. Lily Wei. Dr. Lily, can you stand up? And I met Lily, and Lily was nice enough when I gave a talk at NHP, and she was my translator, but I found out that not only did she translate in English, but she spoke 5 languages. And then I asked her about her training, and her training was so much better than any pediatrician I've ever met in the U.S. So I was so impressed. And then I got to know her hospital, and I said to myself, we don't want to come here and do cleft lips, which the Vietnamese do better than us. We want to try to find things at their hospitals that we can teach them, and then they can do. And one of the very impressive things here versus anywhere else in the world is here we can come and show things, and then the next year we can come back and see in clinic more of those things because the Vietnamese have watched it once, and then they're already doing it.
Dr. Rosen was able to help Vietnamese children through the RICE project. RICE stands for Reconstruction International Cooperative Exchange, a project that he himself started. Let's take a look at how the project is turning young lives around for the better.
Dr. Joe Rosen and Vietnamese surgeons will perform a special surgery today. This boy was born without both ears. Today, the surgeons will recreate his ears from the boy's rib cartilage. Thanks to the support of the project, this operation is implemented free of charge, and more importantly, the American surgeon can transfer his advanced surgery techniques to his Vietnamese colleagues.
These are very sophisticated operations, and we do them in Vietnam because we can do one in Vietnam, and then the people in Vietnam, the surgeons, they learn rapidly how to do it, so that we exchange information, and then the Vietnamese doctors pick it up And then when we come back, we do other operations to show people and they pick it up.
RICE, or Reconstructive International Cooperative Exchange, aims to surgically correct birth malformations as well as hand and facial injuries. Through observing and helping out with dozens of surgeries that Dr. Rosen himself performed, the Vietnamese medical team is able to learn new techniques not yet available in Vietnam, such as fat grafting. But at the same time, the Vietnamese medical team, including Associate Professor Nguyễn Ngọc Hưng, an expert with 30 years of experience in pediatric orthopedic, believes that the American surgeons have things to gain too from Vietnam's medical scene.
Họ đến và chúng ta học được họ rất nhiều, học được nhiều lắm, từ tác phong rồi từ kỹ thuật rồi vân vân và vân vân, chúng ta học được họ. Nhưng đồng thời ấy, thì bản thân họ thì qua trong những trường hợp phẫu thuật thì họ tìm hiểu thêm, họ cũng có thể là biết thêm những cái phẫu thuật, những cái loại dị tật mà họ không gặp, họ chưa gặp bao giờ.
Mỗi năm ông đã đến bệnh viện Nhi Trung ương là phẫu thuật từ 7 đến 10 ca, hoặc có khi là đến 2 đến 15 ca, chủ yếu là các dị tật vùng hàm mặt khó như sọ mặt, dị tật vành tai, rồi các cái dị tật bàn tay khó. Cứ mỗi lần đến như thế thì đã huấn luyện các bác sĩ Việt Nam để dần dần đã tiếp nhận được những cái kỹ thuật mới.
For Dr. Rosen's continuous efforts over the years, the Vietnamese Ministry of Health recently awarded the American surgeon the commemorative medal for people's health. But to Dr. Rosen, merely giving a normal life to a child patient is already his life's dream prize.
So we know that you came to develop the project RICE since 2004. Can you tell me a little bit more about the project?
So the way I envisioned the project after I visited and met Lily and discussed the possibilities. And then I had a mentor, Don Laub, and Don Laub had run another group for 35 years, and there were good and bad things about that group. So I visited Don Laub in California, who was my mentor, and I said, Don, I need your help. Could you explain to me, if you had to start all over again, how would you design a program? And he wrote a 6-page document for me about RICE, explaining what I should do. And I looked at that document and I followed my mentor's document from his experience, the wise man, and I used that coming here. And I emphasize things that he would emphasize, which is it's an exchange of ideas. So in any operation, I learned things from the Vietnamese doctors, and the Vietnamese doctors teach me things. And that's very important. That's why it's a cooperative exchange.
Yeah, I heard a story from the doctors at the Vietnamese National Hospital about your surgery joint with the Vietnamese surgeons. Can you tell me a story about that?
Yeah. So one of the problems when you come to a country like Vietnam is that the Vietnamese are kind people and don't want to offend you. So when you start an operation, they always say, you're the professor, you operate. And they watch, but people learn more by doing. So the problem is that a lot of American doctors don't know how to let the Vietnamese do the operation. They're too busy doing it themselves. So one of the tricks that I've used in the past is that I come into the room with the Vietnamese doctors, and I know they're very good, and maybe there's a few tricks I can teach them, but only if I can watch what they do. So I tell them that I need coffee in the morning, and until my coffee kicks in, my hands shake. So my hands shake, and I say, can you go up to the table and start the operation on the child? And when my hands stop shaking and the coffee settles down, then I can help you. Because first they say, no, you do it. I said, well, I can't do it. And then they start the operation, and I watch what they do, and along the way, then I comment, and I say, in each operation I find 1 or 2 or 3 things I can comment on. But I don't take over. I say, you do the operation, and here are comments. And I also try with operations not to use things from America that you don't have. I try to do things that I know when I leave, you can do them.
So going back to the RICE project, the name is RICE, and I understand it was inspired by Ho Chi Minh. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
It's very important how you name a group. And I knew that I wanted the group to represent not surgeons coming, but I wanted the group to represent the spirit of your culture. So I tried to look through your history books and your poems and your art to find something about your culture. And what I realized that the most important thing would be the spirit of Ho Chi Minh. And I found out that he wrote poems while he was in the prison. So I read through the poems and found a very special poem. And I have the poem here, but what's important about the poem that every Vietnamese should read, or maybe has read, is that he talks about how the Vietnamese people are like rice. And he talks about how if you grind rice down or you apply pressure to the Vietnamese people, the more you grind, the more they turn into diamonds. So it's a people that the harder you push them, the better they turn out. And this sort of spirit of taking rice, and when you grind it down, you turn it into diamonds, I was very impressed with. So then when I took rice, I had to then use rice as the acronym and find letters. And that's where I came up with Reconstructive International Cooperative Exchange, RICE, to be rice.
So the RICE project, what is the main objective?
The main objective is having a self-sustaining program. And most volunteer programs around the world are not self-sustaining. There's a famous saying that most programs use, and the saying is that if you give a man a fish, he eats one meal. But if you teach a man to fish, he eats forever. The project I wanted to do was a project where if I came and did a complex ear reconstruction on a girl born without an ear, I wanted to, in a year or two, come back and not just see the ears that I made here, but I wanted to see more ears because they would do the ears. And pretty soon, once the Vietnamese were doing the ears, then I would look at another complex problem. So as we've taught them how to do ears using rib cartilage that we carve into an ear to make a new ear. We had about 6 of them this year.
Amazing.
And then we shift to an operation where a child's born with a skull that's misshapen. And we work with the doctors here, and we take the whole skull apart and carve it and shape it to give the child back a normal skull. And then eventually what would happen is that we would teach you everything we know. And then if you look at the 6-page document that my mentor Don Laub said, as you get to the end of the 6-page document, he says, take what you've done in Vietnam and then reproduce it somewhere else. So the director of National Hospital Pediatrics is in Laos right now. So maybe what we could do is once we've done this here, then we could take the Vietnamese doctors and some of us and go to Laos or Cambodia and do the same thing. But we shouldn't keep coming back here. We should take that model and move it somewhere else. But in that case, we should do that and take the Vietnamese doctors with us so that we want to keep the friendships, but we don't want to teach people what they already know.
Đại Vĩ Village, Đông Anh District, Hanoi. Today, Dr. Rosen and his friend Huệ revisit Mike, a child patient who underwent surgery conducted by Dr. Rosen himself in 2009. In a childhood accident, Mike lost 4 fingers in his right hand. When his mother went to the National Pediatric Hospital, she met with Dr. Rosen and she was convinced to bring her son in for the first ever surgery of its kind in Vietnam.
Em nghe là ở ngoài bệnh viện Nhi Trung ương là có các chuyên gia của bên nước ngoài về là phẫu thuật cho các em bị các tật, dù là bẩm sinh hoặc là tai nạn. Thì em cũng có ra và được các bác sĩ ngoài bệnh viện đã tư vấn cho em và em về bàn cả gia đình là cũng đồng ý quyết định cho cháu phẫu thuật ạ.
Taking one toe to replace the lost finger. This is the idea that turned Dr. Rosen's surgery into a unique case never handled before by any Vietnamese surgeon. And amazingly, after 19 hours, the surgery ended successfully. Mike is now able to move his new finger, and together with his thumb, he can carry out simple daily routines.
Em có thể cầm nắm với viết được và làm được nhiều việc khác.
Thật sự ra là lúc khi mà chó chưa mổ thì em cũng thấy chó nó như thế này thì chắc là bị vĩnh viễn. Thì khi mà ra bệnh viện các bác sĩ bảo mổ được thì em cũng quyết định cho chó ra mổ. Thì cũng thấy hơn 1 tháng sau thấy tay chó lành lặn thì cũng cử động được, thì em cũng thấy mừng cho chó là cũng đã được mổ được thành công 1 ngón tay đấy.
Holding a cup of tea, this is one among the many things that this boy can do now. But the most important thing for him is the confidence that came with being able to live a normal life. And this is all thanks to the kind-hearted American surgeon, Joseph Rosen.
I know about this case you did with the boy named Mike. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
There was a child that was in a car accident, and all 4 fingers were cut off. So all they had was a thumb and no fingers, so it's very difficult to reach over with just a thumb to pick anything up. So it becomes really a useless hand. And then we saw the child and said to them we could take a toe from the foot, we could take the second toe and bring the second toe up and put it on the hand so they can grab. And we did that 4 years ago, and we followed the child each year. It was a very long operation. It took us from 10 o'clock in the morning until 2 a.m. the next day to bring the toe up and put it in place. But now the patient has a finger and the thumb, and we went to visit them on Sunday at their house, and the child can reach over and grab a glass and drink.
Amazing.
With that.
So the hand's functional again.
Yeah, so it moves, and when you touch it, he says he has good feeling in it. So it's really changed his life with how he uses that hand.
That's amazing. And you operated for 19 hours straight. What pressures did you face?
One of the problems was that it wasn't just cleanly cut off, but the hand was crushed during the injury. So you couldn't just hook it up to its new blood supply here. You had to find vessels all the way back in the wrist and take vein grafts or bridges and hook it up all the way back here. So that took many extra hours to take the toe up and put it here and reconnect its blood supply from here all the way up to the wrist. But now the child again can do things, and they were very happy.
So why do you choose to visit the families of the children that you have done the surgery for?
I think one of the greatest rewards is to see the children and how they interact and the families. And one of the greatest rewards of coming to this country is to be invited into someone's home to learn more about the culture, especially when the 80-year-old grandmother came over and wanted to hold my hand and sit with me. And I thought that was very special, and also wanted to allow us to have lunch with the whole family and for a short period of time feel like you were part of their family.
Yeah. Did your father have an influence on the fact that you like visiting your patients?
So my father was a family doctor, and he practiced for almost 50 years. And when I was a child, he would take me on house calls where we would still go to a patient's house and visit the patient in their home and treat them. So even in my practice in the 21st century, I still go to patients' home. And in one Christmas, which is one of our big holidays, a patient called who had a problem with breast cancer. And it wasn't my patient, but I was on call. And they were going to come in, and I said, why should the patient who's sick come to see me? I asked them, would it be okay if I came to their home? So I went to their house, and the husband came out, and he was 68 years old. And he said, it was 60 years ago, the last time a doctor came to my home. So not only do you get to see the patient, but they invite you in and they give you soup and they share a meal with you. So it's very special versus being seen in a hospital.
So how did you end up being a surgeon?
I think a lot of it was influenced by my father, who always wanted to be a surgeon, but he was too poor, so he could become a doctor, but he couldn't be a surgeon. So he influenced me. And second, I've always had an interest in art and making sculpture and architecture. So if you look at the combination of architecture, making buildings, and art and plastic surgery, it's a field where you can get gratification where you do an operation on somebody like a cleft lip, and 2 hours later, it's very good.
Amazing. The program's success was not easy work. The surgeons have spent grueling hours in the surgery room, sometimes at the cost of their own health. But despite so, they continue to work tirelessly to give birth to more confident children. Our team takes a peek at a day in the life of these doctors at the Vietnamese National Hospital of Pediatrics.
Dr. Mark Melendez is a microsurgery fellow from Johns Hopkins University, Maryland. On hearing about the RISE project, Mark decided to join Dr. Rosen's visit to Vietnam, and this is the first time that he arrives in the country. Apart from the opportunities to learn from Dr. Rosen's experiences in surgery, the trip allows him to have Vietnamese colleagues and, of course, local child patients.
It's been a very enriching experience for me, seeing the patients that are in need of our services, and they are also here very willingly and very happy to see us, and I'm very grateful to be part of this experience.
Every day, the National Pediatrics Hospital receives hundreds to thousands of child patients, and dozens of them require surgery. For Gary Fried, a surgeon that has been working with Dr. Rosen in the past years, this is his second visit to Vietnam. The American surgeon expects that he and the other team members could also gain some experience while they shared their own techniques with Vietnamese medical colleagues.
The National Pediatric Hospital gets patients from everywhere around, and so they have complex problems that are challenging, and it's a good opportunity to gain experience and to learn from your doctors and to work together.
I gained so much from this experience, not only just seeing everything and experiencing it, but working with the Vietnamese surgeons. They're teaching us a lot, and the nurses are teaching us too. So you definitely gain something and learn a lot.
For the past 8 years, the RISE project has created opportunities for many American doctors and surgeons to arrive in Vietnam. They have played an important part in the knowledge-sharing process and bringing confidence back to Vietnamese child patients.
So tell us, why did you bring the best reconstructive surgeons from America to Vietnam?
I wanted to share things, and only were we able to cheat somebody if we brought our best people. We can't bring an average American surgeon. We have to bring our best if we're really going to do that exchange. And over the years, I've tried to, as much as possible, bring only people that I thought not just wanted to visit Vietnam, but would bring stuff here that was very valuable, and that's their skill. Plus, they had to have a personality that they're willing to share, because not everybody has that.
You come to Vietnam in the spirit of sharing, right? So there's an exchange. What knowledge has Vietnamese medicine shared with you, except for the surgical? As we talked about, they shared surgery. They've helped us look at systems and how you can provide basic care. They've also showed you that when you see a patient on the ward, the family is there. Often in America, we don't have the kind of family at the bedside as you do. And also when we describe a case to a patient, I already know that they don't want to make a decision right away. I say to them, here's what we want to do. You go back to your family and get your whole family around a meal and discuss the pros and cons, because the family decides whether it's the appropriate thing to do. It's not just make the decision, we're in a rush. And sometimes I say, can we see other children with it? Or can we see another case? Or can we talk to somebody? And I say, that's fine. And we try to share with them information so they can have what we call informed consent. And sometimes I can spend an hour here with a family and have that discussion, which is not only good for the family, but it's good for your doctors to hear about all the different pros and cons. And it's good for the doctors I bring along to hear all that. The spirit of sharing between Vietnam and Dr. Rosen didn't begin recently. Rather, it began quite some time ago, and it's linked to Vietnamese history. We'll see what part of Vietnamese history is so close to the heart of Dr. Rosen.
President Ho Chi Minh's Still House and his relic site, a common venue for many international visitors, welcome a special guest today. The American surgeon, Dr. Rosen, has long nurtured a great respect for the Vietnamese great leader Ho Chi Minh. For decades, Dr. Rosen has been an avid reader on Ho Chi Minh's life and ideology. The American doctor thus possesses a great understanding about Ho Chi Minh.
Ho Chi Minh not only represented independence and freedom for the Vietnamese people, but he looked at a grander view of independence and freedom for all oppressed people around the world. So when he traveled and left Vietnam as a young man and then came back years later, what he saw around the world was not just suffering in Vietnam, but suffering in many countries. And he felt that Vietnam could not only be free, but it could be an example for other countries to have their people be free and equal.
Unlike other visitors, Dr. Rosen takes any opportunity he has to revisit the relic site. This is his 5th time. Dr. Rosen says the place allows him to understand more about Ho Chi Minh. The American doctor doesn't just learn about Ho Chi Minh through books, he's also eager to acquire knowledge from every Vietnamese he meets on his way. Dr. Rosen knows a lot of stories about Ho Chi Minh, up to the minute details, like the various names the late president used during his revolutionary life or the number of languages he could speak. Dr. Rosen impresses every person he talks to with his detailed knowledge.
Đây có thể nói là một cái vị khách đặc biệt bởi vì thứ nhất là ông là người Mỹ nhưng ông lại có một cái kiến thức rất là sâu rộng về cuộc đời hoạt động cách mạng của Chủ tịch Hồ Chí Minh, và qua đó thì tôi có thể cảm nhận được là ông có một cái tình cảm rất là đặc biệt đối với vị lãnh tụ của đất nước Việt Nam cũng như đối với nhân dân Việt Nam chúng ta.
Về sự hiểu biết đối với Bác Hồ ấy, thì chúng ta phải biết là như thế này, là ông đã tìm hiểu từ khi bác rời Việt Nam, rời tổ quốc của chúng ta, bác đi tìm đường cứu nước, rồi bác đã ở những đâu, rồi bác làm việc như thế nào, rồi khi về Việt Nam khi nào và làm những cái gì, là rất tường tận và rất chi tiết. Những cái đó là vô cùng ngạc nhiên.
A badge with Ho Chi Minh's portrait is always seen on Dr. Rosen's jacket. He says that he has adopted a lot of Ho Chi Minh's thoughts in his life.
You don't need a lot of material things to accomplish a lot. You need a spirit and a vision, and just with a few things, you can do much.
So what is it about Ho Chi Minh that mesmerized you?
I think that it wasn't just his vision of freedom and independence for the Vietnamese people. One of the things that really struck me is that in his early 20s, he went on a French freighter from Saigon at the time, or now Ho Chi Minh City, to Marseille. And on the way there, they stopped off of Africa, where he saw many local natives swim out to the boat and drowned. And he saw people laugh about it. And he was really struck at the time that one of his goals in life would not just to be provide freedom and independence for the Vietnamese people, but he really had a cause for all people that have been repressed by their governments. So his goal was to sort of work tirelessly during his career, not just for his own people, but globally for all people, to allow them to be independent and free, and let poor people be treated equally. And from his original independence speech, to have everybody in the country, all people, not just men, but men and women, have equality within the society that he wanted to create.
I can tell that you know a lot about Ho Chi Minh's travels. Is there a particular story that you remember that you'd like to share?
So I think Ho Chi Minh had a sense of humor. So he spent a number of years in Paris working many jobs, from journalist to making cakes. And the secret police in Paris assigned 2 or 3 people full-time to follow him around day and night to record everything he did. And he noticed in the 20s that France was poor, it was difficult economic times, and he thought it would be good that he could save the French government money that they were spending following him around. So he set up a meeting with the head of security for Paris and France, and he sat down in front of him and he said, I have a proposition for you. You're wasting money on 2 or 3 salaries of your policemen. They're very good, they follow me around everywhere, but I could do even a better job for you, and I'm willing every morning to write up a sheet telling you every hour during the day where I'm going to be, and I'll just deliver it in the morning to you, and you can have the 2 or 3 policemen do something else that's important for you, and you can save money. It would be my way of helping the French people. But they didn't agree, and they continue to have people follow them around.
To connect to that story that you just told us, we also prepared a game for you, a challenge. It's a rather special section. We rarely do this with our guests. So instead of just talking about yourself today, we'll ask you to talk about other people, namely Ho Chi Minh. So our audience will challenge you regarding Ho Chi Minh, and they'll ask you a few questions. So let's see if you can answer them.
I hope I can answer some of the questions.
I'm sure you will be able to.
Good evening, Mr. Joseph. I'm Hong Vân, and I'm a student in Foreign Trade University. I know that during his traveling around the world, Ho Chi Minh has visited many countries, including the United States. So do you remember when and where he has visited, and what did he do to survive here?
Your English is very good.
Thank you.
In the U.S., it was documented that he was at least in New York and Boston. Boston's close to me, so when he was in Boston, and this was in his probably late 20s, when he was in Boston, he worked at the Parker Hotel in Boston, and that's where he was a pastry chef. I think he was probably a pastry chef there because he learned how to be a pastry chef when he was in Paris. So he's pretty good at it.
Thank you very much. I'm really impressed by your knowledge about our president. Thank you.
My name's Ling. I'm a law student, and I have a question for you. During his time in the U.S., did Ho Chi Minh visit the Statue of Liberty? Why and why not?
So what I've heard is that he did visit the Statue of Liberty, and when people went back and looked at it and studied it, when you visit some place in the U.S., there's a book at the place, and in the book people can sign the book, and they looked at that book from when he was there. I think he was in the U.S. around 1913, so it would have been 23 years old, and he signed the book and made some comments about the Statue of Liberty in the book.
Excellent.
Thanks.
So, another question.
I'm Chang. I study in Foreign Trade University. You know Ho Chi Minh's many names, and when did he use name Nguyễn Ái Quốc?
Can you come up here?
Dr. Rosen, I don't know if that counts. It's a little bit like cheating.
1930.
1930. Yes. What historical event that was take to name? Do you remember?
Yeah. So that's when he was in Russia at one of the communist conventions.
Very good.
Thank you.
So we have one last question.
Hello, I'm Chi from Foreign Trade Universities, and now I have a question for you. The first Vietnamese Declaration of Independence on September 2nd, 1945, quote a line from the U.S. Declaration of Independence. What is that quote?
The main quote that I thought was that our Declaration of Independence says that all men are created equal, and Ho Chi Minh changed it to all people are created equal. And by making that small one-word change, making that simple change, it had a huge difference in terms of the spirit that he wanted to broadcast to the public at that time. So it was one of those talks where you heard him speak and you said that I need to change what I do and I need to dedicate myself to his cause, because it's not his cause, it's our cause, and it's not just the Vietnamese cause, but it's a global cause of all people uniting together to provide freedom and independence to everyone, which is still a cause around the world that people are fighting.
Wow, your knowledge is really quite amazing.
Each time revisiting President Ho Chi Minh's relic site in Vietnam, Dr. Rosen finds new motivation to keep RISE going. Apart from RISE 1 effort, Dr. Rosen and his fellow men are working to develop the RISE 2 project. Accordingly, the remote interaction, consultation, and epidemiology of RISE 2 is working to better integrate Vietnam's rural clinics with urban and regional hospitals using smartphones. And under RISE 3, Rosen said beyond helping the Vietnamese people, he likes bringing Americans to Vietnam and getting them excited about what they can do in other countries.
So we've heard of new plans that you have for Vietnam about RISE 2 and the RISE 3 project. RISE 2 involves diagnosis via SMS, is that right? How might this work in Vietnam?
So RISE 2 stands for Remote Interactive Consultation and Epidemiology. And it looks at what are the other things to affect the population. So the global incidence or burden of disease, only the 13% of the global burden of disease is surgery. The rest is other healthcare. So we want to see how we can affect things like the incidence of disease. And we want to look at a system where you look at the hubs such as NHP in Hanoi and the Ministry of Health, and then look at the provincial hospitals, the district hospitals, and then the 10,000 communal clinics. And it'd be very valuable that if someone coming to a communal clinic who had a medical problem for a child, instead of taking a child from Sapa and spending 24 hours to get to Hanoi with a child that could be treated in Sapa, that they could communicate that through to the district, the province, and NHP and get a response back and know what to do. So we're trying to decide the simplest system that could be implemented throughout the communes now and test that out. So SMS is something that is somewhat ubiquitous. Almost everybody has it on their cell phones.
Wow, that's amazing.
Well, RISE 3 is really about culture and as much as possible getting the Americans to understand the Vietnamese culture. So when my mentor talked about these kind of trips, he talked about something called a peak experience. Americans come with certain ideals, and if they come and they experience this, we're hoping that they'll improve their ideals and shift from certain ideals to better ideals where their goals are closer to what Ho Chi Minh believes, which is sharing with people. There's a saying in Africa, which is great. The saying in Africa is give a little gift, get a bigger gift. So when you come and give a little gift, like take a toe from the foot and put it on the hand, you get a much bigger gift when you get to sit in the family home and have the 80-year-old grandmother come over and give you a hug. And there's one other really interesting story, which is when we go around the world, we typically look at differences between people. And one of the games I play with children when I go on trips is I say to the children, sit down and write down the differences between a monkey and a giraffe, and they write them down like the names of Ho Chi Minh, and they wrote down like 20 names. And then I say to them, well, now write down the similarities between a monkey and a giraffe, and they write down hundreds of similarities. And I'm trying to express to them that wherever we go in the world, there may be differences between the Vietnamese and the Americans, and there may be a few differences between how you look and I look, and how you talk and I talk. But the vast number of things are very similar. So we're very, very close once we stop looking at the differences and we concentrate on the similarities. Even the children that are born with differences, it's more important for the children to realize that just because you're born without fingers, you're still really very much the same as the other kid.
So your father has had a great influence on you, and you've had a great influence on your daughter. And I know she's going to be a doctor, and she's planning on coming to Vietnam next year. Can you tell me a little bit more about her plans?
Yeah, she's very interested in going around the world and helping people. And she would like to come next year and visit Vietnam and work here. And the first thing she would do when she's here is teach English. And she's trying to decide different ways that she can influence people. One way you can influence people is being a doctor, but the other way that she's very interested in is being a guidance counselor.
Yeah.
Because she really likes high school students, and she really thinks she has great skills, which I believe she does, to help them pick their future. And one thing she does now in America is goes to summer camps where she trains counselors in training, and has about 16 girls that she spends the summer helping them be better, responsible counselors. So she really loves interactions with people and seeing how she can help them. And she sees an opportunity coming to Vietnam that she can exchange knowledge with people, and English would be a good entry point.
Thank you so much for being here and taking the time to sit down and talk to me. I really enjoyed our talk.
It's been a real pleasure. It's very special for us. So this is one of the high points each year for me to spend a few weeks here, and maybe in the future, if it's okay, I'll come more.
Yes, our doors are always open for you, and whoever you wish to bring with you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Some people change lives. There are those life saviors, but Dr. Rosen not only changes lives, he allows the lives he meets here in Vietnam to affect his life too. His two-way connection with Vietnam is something Vietnamese people will treasure and try to deepen every day. And that's it for Talk Vietnam. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. See you soon.